"The thing I want most," she said slowly, "is for you to die." I heard every word, every breath of my daughter as that sentence dropped into the warm San Diego morning. Sunlight streamed through the wide window, glinting on the polished wooden table where the chocolate strawberry cake I had just brought Saturday. The smell of cream, strawberries, and vanilla mixed, sweet to the point of suffocation. I was 73, a woman who had lived through enough funerals, enough losses to think nothing could make my heart tremble again. But hearing my daughter say that, my heart pounded as if 45 years of motherhood were drained out of me in a single second. I never thought that at this age I would witness the moment my own flesh and blood wished I were dead. Camila's house, my only daughter's, is on a small slope overlooking the sea in La Jolla, the kind of neighborhood I once dreamed of, only through glossy magazines. I still remember that morning clearly. I woke up at 6, brewed coffee, ironed the ocean blue dress she once said, looked best on me, then drove nearly an hour to her house. I even stopped by the French bakery in the Gaslamp Quarter to pick up her favorite chocolate strawberry cake, $180. They wrapped it carefully with a pink ribbon, and I added a handwritten note. "Happy birthday to my daughter, the greatest love of my life." My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel as I drove. Afraid the cake would tip over, yet my heart fluttered like that of a young mother going to her little girl's 6th birthday. But when I arrived, the smile on my face froze. The door opened. Camila stood there, hair tied high, wearing a crisp white blouse, the faint scent of expensive perfume in the air. Her eyes slid over Menno joy, no surprise, only a flicker of irritation. "Oh, it's you, Mom." 3 light words, but cold, as if my presence was an inconvenience. I forced a smile, lifted the box, trying to summon a trace of the old warmth. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I brought your favorite chocolate strawberry, just like when you were little." Camila stayed silent for a few seconds, then the kind of sigh that precedes something heavy. "Mom, we need to talk." She turned and walked inside. No invitation, no thank you. I followed, uneasy but hopeful, thinking maybe she wanted to confide in me, or complain about her husband, or work. The house glowed with sunlight, white walls, glossy wooden floors, and the faint scent of lavender oil in the air. I knew every brick of this place because I was the one who paid the $130,000 down payment so she and her husband could buy it. When Camila got married, I wanted her to be happy, so I didn't hesitate to give her my entire retirement savings, thinking simply, I live alone, she needs to start her life. I looked around the wedding photo on the wall, my twin grandchildren playing in the garden, everything proof that my life had once meant something. Camila sat on the sofa, arms crossed, legs neatly folded, eyes cold and sharp. "You know, Mom," she began, tone oddly calm, "I've been thinking about this birthday, about gifts, about what would really make me happy." I smiled faintly, trying to shake off the unease. "Of course, darling. Tell me what you'd like. A trip to Europe? That bracelet you loved?" Camila looked at me, a faint smile curling on her lips, a smile that made my heart turn to ice. "What I want most," she said, stressing every word, "is for you to die." The room fell terrifyingly silent. I couldn't hear the ocean, nor the cars outside, only the echo of her voice looping in my head. I thought I misheard. What did you just say?" I whispered, fingers clutching the hem of my dress. "You heard me, Mom," she replied evenly, voice cold, merciless. "I'm tired of you. Tired of the surprise calls, tired of you dropping by unannounced, tired of you always being there, making me feel suffocated. I need freedom, don't you understand? I want to live without wondering if you'll call today or show up tomorrow. I just want, you're gone." My hands trembled, breath catching in my chest. "Camila," I said, voice cracking, "I only want to be close to you, to see you happy, to be part of your life. You're everything to me." She let out a dry laugh, as if I had just told a childish joke. "That's exactly the problem, Mom. I don't want to be everything to anyone. You should live your own life using me as the reason you exist." I searched her eyes, desperate to find even a glimmer of what used to be there. Kindness, love, or just a hint of gratitude. but all I saw was fatigue and disdain. I don't remember when I stood up. Maybe it was when I realized there was nothing left to hold on to. I picked up the cake box, the candle tilting, wax dripping, and looked at her one last time. "After everything, is this really what you want?" I asked softly. "Yes," she answered firmly. "I think that would be the greatest gift you could give your disappearance." I heard the sound of my heart breaking. I turned away, walking through the haze. At the door, I paused, hoping, foolishly, she'd call me back, say, "I'm sorry." But behind me there was only a sigh, and the dragging sound of her slippers across the floor. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Camila." The words came out so faintly I wasn't sure she heard. Then I stepped out of the house I once helped her build, into the sunlight. The sea breeze whipped through my hair, sharp and cold. I got into the car, set the cake on the seat, and drove off without looking back. The strawberry scent filled the car, thick enough to make me nauseous. At every red light, I saw families laughing, embracing through the window. I wondered if they had ever lived through the moment their daughter told them to die. When I got back to my small apartment in Chula Vista, I sat on the old sofa, the same one that had rocked Camila through her coughing nights. I looked around the quiet room, the only place that still held traces of the child I thought I knew. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Only a strange emptiness settled in. I turned on the kitchen light, its weak yellow glow covering everything. The small dining table, the framed photo of Camila in her wedding dress, the thank you letter she wrote to me 10 years ago, the messy words, "Thank you, Mom, for giving me everything." I laughed, a dry sound echoing through the apartment. I didn't know then that the moment that door closed behind me, everything in my life was about to change forever. When I arrived back at my small apartment in Chula Vista, the sun was already leaning west, light streaming through the old window, coating the wooden floor in a thin layer of gold. I set my keys on the table, looked around the silent room, and the first feeling that hit me wasn't anger. It was a question. How did I live my life to end up at 73 being told by my only daughter to die? I sat down on the worn brown, the same one I used to lie Camila on when she had fevers at her age, and for the first time in a long while, I let my memories take me back. We weren't always like this. There was a time when Camila was the only reason I woke up every morning. I was 28 when I gave birth to her in a small delivery room at the hospital where I worked night shifts. Her father, Luis, died in a construction accident when she was barely over a year old. We never got to buy a house, never saved money, never prepared for the future. I stayed in America with just one thing: legal papers and a tiny baby girl I swore would never want for anything. I worked as a nurse at Mercy Hospital for nearly 40 years, mostly night shifts, because they paid extra and because during the day I had to take Camila to school. I remember those cold San Diego nights, wrapping her in my coat and letting her sleep in the nurse's break room because there was no one to watch her. I'd hang IV bags for patients, then turn to check on my little girl curled under a thin blanket, my heart aching but still full of quiet joy. At least she was safe. When she was 3, Camila caught pneumonia and was hospitalized for 5 days. Insurance didn't cover it all. The bill for injections and antibiotics came to over $1,000. I didn't have $1,000. I went home and opened the small silver tin my mother had left me back in Mexico. Inside were her gold wedding ring and a pair of old earrings. I sold them. I still remember that day clearly. It was drizzling, my hands trembling as I handed over my mother's ring. But that night, when I returned to the hospital and saw my daughter breathing evenly again, her cheeks pink, I knew I had no regrets. That night she hugged my neck and whispered, "Mom, you're my hero." Words like that kept me going for years. When she was 16, her school held a prom. She wanted a blush pink dress with crystals and a full skirt. It cost $700, an outrageous number for a night shift nurse back then. I asked, "Do you really need it?" She looked at me, both excited and afraid. "Mom, I just don't want to be the only girl without a beautiful dress." I understood that feeling. I had once been a poor girl without a dress, so I picked up extra weekend shifts, ate sandwiches 3 days in a row, cut out my morning coffee until I had $700. The day I brought the dress home, Camila jumped up and hugged me, kissing my cheeks over and over. "You're the best mom ever." I still remember the smell of her hair that day, fruit shampoo, sweet and clean, like a promise that someday she'd take care of me when I was old. When she went to college, she changed her major twice, from education communications to interior design. Each change meant new classes, new tuition. I didn't complain. Altogether, those 4 years cost me around $38,000, money I borrowed against this tiny apartment I live in now. I told myself, her education is hers, the apartment is mine. I live alone, don't need much. I always thought that as a mother, I was supposed to give up. Then came the wedding. Camila wanted an outdoor reception in Coronado, under strings of golden lights, with long white-covered tables, imported roses, and a seafood menu. Ethan was a new engineer then, not making much. Camila called me crying, "Mom, I've dreamed of this wedding since I was a little girl." I looked at her, remembering all the years I'd worked so she'd never have to bow her head in shame, and I said the words I always said, "Leave it to me." And I paid more than $30,000. On her wedding day, she told me, "I'll never forget what you've done for me." Turns out people forget easily. Then came the house in La Jolla, the same one I was thrown out of today with a wish for my death. When she and Ethan wanted to buy it, they were short on the down payment. I went home, opened the retirement account I had funded alone for decades, and withdrew $130,000. I signed the papers without ever thinking, one day she might see me as a burden. I only thought, my daughter will have a home by the sea. 6 years ago, when the twins were born, I practically became their nanny. Every weekend, Camila would say, "Mom, come watch the kids so Ethan and I can go out." And I went. Whenever she said, "Mom, can you shop and cook for us? I'm busy," I'd bring over groceries, chicken stew, soup, and prepped vegetables in her fridge. I never asked for money. What kind of mother charges her child for babysitting? Then, when Ethan lost his job, they started falling behind on the mortgage. Who paid for 6 straight months, $12,000 total? I did. Who paid $3,500 for the twins' braces so they wouldn't feel ashamed around their friends? Me again. Who bought Christmas gifts, birthday presents, toys, Disneyland tickets, totaling over $8,000 across the years? Still me. Tonight, after my daughter told me to just die, I pulled out all the papers, old receipts, bank slips, tuition bills, mortgage refinance agreements. I hadn't kept them out of suspicion, I kept them out of pride, because I used to think, these are proof that I was a good mother. I spread them all over the table. I took a pen and paper and started adding. Raising her from birth to adulthood, about $190,000. College, $38,000. Wedding, $30,000. House down payment, $130,000. Unemployment help, $12,000. Braces, $3,500. Gifts, babysitting, groceries, around $8,000 to $10,000. Altogether, nearly $420,000. I stared at that number, dizzy. $420,000 for many people. That's freedom, a house, a second life. For me, it had become the excuse for my daughter to say, "You did all that to control me." I leaned back on the chair, the paper full of numbers blurring before my eyes. If I had put that money into a retirement fund 20 years ago, I could be living in a seaside apartment now, traveling to Europe once a year, dining at restaurants I liked without waiting for coupons. But I chose to love. I chose to believe that a mother's love was the safest investment. I told myself, when I'm old, she won't abandon me. Today, she proved that one-sided love isn't an investment's depletion. What hurt most wasn't the money. It was how easily Camila wiped it all away. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "Don't be sad." She didn't even say, "I'll try to do better." She only demanded that I disappear. As if 45 years of my life made me nothing more than an overzealous employee, someone you lay off once you're done being served. I sat there for a long time, my hands still resting on the pile of bills, and I realized something cruel but true. I had taught her that I was always willing to sacrifice, and that's why today she dared to tell me to die. I had taught her that Mom will always pay, Mom will always come, Mom will always cancel her plans to babysit, and Mom will always wear old clothes so her child can wear new ones. I had taught her that my boundaries were non-existent. And when a person has no boundaries, others will step over them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, asking myself over and over, if I really disappeared, what would her life look like? And in that silence, another thought rose clear, calm, certain. She wants me gone? Fine. But she'll learn that my disappearance will cost her dearly. I didn't know then that this thought would lead me into another kind of life where, for the first time in 45 years, I would live for me. The next morning, I woke up just as dawn broke. The first light slipped through the old curtains and fell across the papers scattered all over the table. Bills, receipts, bank agreements, and that sheet of paper crowded with numbers I had added up the night before, $420,000. I read that number over and over, 10 times at least, and still couldn't believe that my entire life could be folded into a few messy pages, into digits that didn't carry a single ounce of warmth. $420,000 and a daughter who told her mother to die. Maybe the most painful thing in life isn't betrayal, but realizing that everything you sacrificed was never seen as love, only as a tool. I stood up and boiled water for coffee. The steam blurred my vision. I remembered all those years I made my coffee weak to save milk so I could buy whole milk for Camila. I remembered telling my coworkers, as long as she finishes college, I'll be at peace. Now she had a degree, a house, a husband, children, and the only thing she wanted was for me to disappear. I sat down at the table and picked up my phone. My heartbeat was slow but distinct. I didn't even know why I was doing it, maybe to confirm or to see if there was a trace of regret in her voice. I dialed my daughter's number. 5 rings. Then her voice came through, tired, dry. "Mom, what now?" I froze. The way she said "what now" sounded like I was an inconvenience. "Camila," I said, my voice trembling, "I just want to ask, did you really mean what you said yesterday?" Silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a sigh. "Mom, I don't want to argue anymore. You know how I feel. I need space, do you understand? I need distance. You said you wanted me to die. Yeah, I said it because I'm exhausted. You show up whenever you want, you ask, you worry, you insert yourself into everything. I can't take it anymore." I clenched my hand. "I only want you to be happy." "Do you think I'm not happy? Can't you see every time you call? I get tense. You make me feel guilty. I can't live with that weight forever." I laughed, the sound coming out choked and dry. "A weight? I'm your weight? You're doing this to yourself, Mom. I just want to live in peace. You need to find something else to do. Stop clinging to me. You always say you love me, but your love suffocates me." I didn't know what to say. At this age, I never imagined I would have to listen to my own daughter explain to me how a mother's love can be harmful. I felt exposed, as if everything good I'd ever believed in had suddenly become evidence against me. I took a deep breath, still shaking but steady. "Camila, I just need you to tell me one thing. Did you ever love me?" The line went quiet. Then her voice came, low and strangely cold. "Don't make this dramatic. I do love you, but love doesn't mean you have to show up all the time, sacrifice everything. I need you to respect boundaries." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Boundaries," I repeated. "I understand now." I hung up. No goodbye, no listening to whatever she might say next. My hand was ice cold, but my mind had never been clearer. That was enough. No more confusion. My daughter truly believed her mother's love was a form of control. Maybe she was right about one thing. I needed to live my own life. But she didn't understand yet that once I started doing that, her world would change in ways she didn't expect. I stood up, grabbed my wallet and coat. Outside, the ocean air was still salty. I walked to the bank a few blocks away, the one where I had a joint savings account with Camila for emergencies. I opened the door and stepped into the cold fluorescent light. The young teller smiled brightly. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. How are you today?" "I'm well," I said evenly. I'd like to close the joint account I have with my daughter. She looked slightly surprised, glanced back at the screen. Account 570811, right? There's about $20,000 in it. That's right, I want to transfer it all to my personal account. Are you sure, ma'am? That account is currently being used to support your daughter's mortgage. I looked at her and smiled. All the more reason. I signed my name at the bottom of the form, every stroke firm and decisive. When I saw the $20,000 moved into my personal account, something pricked inside me, not guilt, but relief. Every dollar in there was mine. My sweat, my tears, my night shifts. I walked out of the bank, sunlight touching my silver hair. It felt like I had just opened a small door into another world. But that was only the first step. At noon, I went to the real estate office where Ethan and Camila had signed the mortgage for the house. I had been the co-signer on that loan, just in case. Now, that gave me a right that not many people knew about. The manager, Mrs. Collins, recognized me right away. "Oh, Mrs. Johnson, long time no see. Everything all right?" "It is," I said, smiling a thin smile. "I'd like to review the mortgage file I co-signed. I need to understand my rights." She turned to her computer and printed out a thick stack of papers. "Yes, you're a co-responsible financial party, and you also have the right to initiate legal action or request foreclosure if the primary party becomes unable to pay." I nodded. "Good. Then I'd like full copies of the file." She hesitated for a moment, then did as I asked. I thanked her, folded the documents, and put them in my bag, feeling my grip steady. Each sheet of paper felt like a thin piece of armor, but enough to shield me from years of being taken for granted. On the way home, I stopped by Attorney Ansell's office, an old friend of my late husband. He was over 70 now, hair white but eyes still sharp. "Juliana, I didn't think I'd see you here," he said, shaking my hand. "What's going on?" I sat down and told him everything. No dramatics, no tears, just the truth. The sentence, "I want you to die, Mom," echoed in that dark wood office like an oath. Ansell was quiet for a long time, then said softly, "Juliana, what do you intend to do?" I looked straight at him. "I want to change my will. Everything I have, insurance, savings, this apartment, will no longer go to my daughter. I want to set up a fund for my 2 grandchildren, but they will only receive it when they turn 25. The rest I want to donate to the Young Women in Need Foundation." Ansell nodded slowly. "Are you sure?" "More sure than ever," I said without a tremor. "You know," he added, "she might react very strongly." I smiled, for the first time without bitterness. "I expect she will, but I think she already chose this." When I signed the first draft of the new will, my hand didn't shake anymore. I felt as if an invisible chain had just dropped to the floor. 45 years of being bound because I believed motherhood meant endless sacrifice. Now, for the first time, I was sacrificing that role to save myself. I left the office when the sun was already tilting. The walk home was quiet, just wind and the sound of my shoes on the pavement. I bought a small bottle of wine, something I had never allowed myself to buy because it felt extravagant. That night, I poured myself a glass, looked out at the city lights through my window, and told myself, if my daughter wants me to disappear, I will. Just not the way she thinks. I didn't know then that this decision would mark the beginning of my second life, where, at last, I would live for myself. The next morning I woke up with a strange feeling, relieved and chilled, as if I were standing on the edge of another life. For years I had always started my day by wondering whether Camila needed anything, whether she was okay, whether she'd had breakfast yet. Today, for the first time in more than 4 decades, I didn't think about my daughter. I made my coffee strong, turned on the radio, let soft jazz fill the small apartment, and looked out the window where the distant ocean was slowly turning turquoise. A thought flashed through my mind, clear and calm to the point of being frightening. She wants her mother to disappear? Fine, but I will disappear in a way she will never forget. I sat at the table and opened my old brown notebook, the one I used to write down medications for patients, now turned into a notebook for planning my own life. On the first line I wrote, "Disappearance plan." Under that, I listed each step as if I were preparing for a critical surgery. Close all joint accounts with Camila. Completed. Make copies of all mortgage documents for the La Jolla house. Completed. Finalize the new will with attorney Ansel pending official signature. Reclaim co-ownership rights if Ethan becomes unable to pay. Withdraw a large amount from personal savings. Reserve it for the journey out of the U.S. and plan relocation to Europe or somewhere far away where no one knows who I am. Write to Kamilathi final letter. I reread the list. Each item made my heart beat slow but precise. It felt like I was writing the script for my own rebirth. No longer the devoted mother, no longer anyone's shadow, but a woman who is independent and has the right to decide the rest of her life. At noon, the phone rang. The screen showed Camila. I watched it light up, blink like a test. I waited for the third ring before picking up. What do you need? Her voice came through, cold, as if that horrifying morning had never happened. Mom, I have a company party this weekend. Can you watch the kids? Just Friday night. I'll send an Uber for you. I was silent for a few seconds, then answered softly, No. Surprise on the other end. What do you mean, no? I thought you were free. No, I have plans. What plans? Ones that don't concern you. The line went quiet, then a sarcastic little laugh. What's wrong with you? I'm asking for one night. You've lived your whole life for me, and now you can't watch your grandkids for one evening? I pressed my lips together. Lived your whole life for me, and that is exactly why I have to stop now. Camila, I said, voice calm, do you remember, on your birthday, you said the gift you wanted most was for me to die? Her voice went rigid. Mom, I said that because I was mad. Mad or not, it was honest. You wanted me out of your life, and I'm doing exactly that, starting with the smallest thing, saying no. Mom, she began, but I'd already hung up. There was nothing left to say. That afternoon I went to the bank again, this time not to transfer but to withdraw. I asked to take out $30,000 in cash, nearly all the money I'd saved in these later years. The teller asked, Are you traveling somewhere, ma'am? I smiled. Yes, a long trip. They handed me a large envelope. I put it carefully into the safe in my room, along with my passport and the property papers. Looking at them lying there in the warm yellow light, I felt a strange stillness. All this time, everything I owned was tied to Camila's name, tied to us. For the first time, everything belonged to me alone. In the evening, I knocked on the apartment next door. Elvira opened up my neighbor on the same floor, 68, widowed, silver-haired but bright-eyed. Juliana, you look different. Is something wrong? Yes, I said, but not in a bad way. I need your help. We sat in her kitchen, the smell of coffee blending with the scent of the lavender she grew on her balcony. I told her everything from the birthday morning to Camila's words, to the will, to the disappearance plan. Elvira stayed quiet the whole time, her eyes slowly filling with tears. My God, I can't believe she said that. After everything you've done, believe it, I said, my voice light as smoke. And now I need you to help me with one small thing. I told her the plan. Elvira would be the one to accidentally discover my apartment empty after I'd left. She would be the one to call Camila and say, Juliana is missing, and then hand over the letter I left on the table. That letter would be the final goodbye. Elvira listened, pressed her lips together, then gave a little smile, a mischievous one. If you want to stage it, I'm the perfect actress. I taught drama for 30 years. I laughed for the first time in days. Good, then we have ourselves a performance. Elvira, you know, I don't want revenge. I just want Camila to understand my value, even if it has to be through a shock. Elvira put her hand over mine and squeezed. You will make her understand. Sometimes, only when a mother is gone does a child realize she was holding their whole world together. That night, I opened my laptop, created a new Word document, and typed the title. Letter to Camila, I wrote slowly, each word pulled straight from my chest. My daughter, you said the gift you wanted most was for me to disappear. So today, I am giving you that gift. By the time you read this letter, I will have gone far. Not because of hatred, but because I need to live the rest of my life, the part I lost when I lived only so you could be happy. You will find in the attached envelope all the documents. The new will, the confirmation canceling the health insurance I was paying for you, and the bank paper removing my name from the La Jolla house account. From now on, your life will be easier because I will no longer interfere. But at the same time, it will be harder because I will no longer be there to pay bills, to watch the kids, to shield you. I wish you well. Enjoy the freedom you wanted so much, because true freedom always has a price. For you, that price is losing your mother. I wrote until late. The room held only the desk lamp and the ticking clock. When I typed the last line, I read it over, without crying. There was only a deep quiet inside me. I printed 3 copies, one to leave with Elvira, one to store in the safe, and one to put in my bag. At 5 the next morning, Elvira knocked on my door as we'd agreed. "Are you ready?" "I think I am," I said, closing my suitcase. 2 of them, one big, one small, enough for a new beginning. I handed her the spare keys. "On Wednesday, call Camila. Tell her you haven't seen me for 2 days. The door was open, my things were still there, and only this letter remained." Elvira nodded, eyes glistening. "Are you scared?" "I used to be afraid of being poor, of being alone, of being abandoned. Now I'm only afraid of one thing, dying without ever having lived for myself." We hugged tightly. When I stepped outside, dawn was just a pale mist. The San Diego morning air carried salt and jasmine. I looked back at the little apartment one last time. The place I'd treated as a resting stop now turned into a marker of a life I was leaving behind. I rolled my suitcase, listening to the wheels on the cold tiles, and felt as light as the breeze. In the taxi to the airport, the driver asked, "Traveling far, ma'am?" I looked toward the brightening horizon and replied, "I'm going to find myself." I didn't know then that this flight would not only take me out of the country, but also away from the person I used to be, my mother, whose daughter told her to die. Because sometimes, to begin again, we have to die in the old version of ourselves first. The airport loudspeaker echoed through the morning mist. I sat at gate 22, clutching my old leather bag that held everything left of my life: passport, bank papers, a one-way ticket to Zurich, and Elvira's note written in small letters. "When you arrive, send me the first postcard." I looked around, people rushing, hurrying, all seemingly moving towards someone. And me, 73 years old, the only one leaving everything behind. No one to see me off, no one who even knew I was leaving. I used to fear loneliness, but right now, loneliness smelled like freedom. As the plane lifted off, San Diego grew smaller beneath the wings. I looked down at the streets where I used to drive Camila to school, the beaches where I waited for her after work, the houses where I had babysat her children. Each image drifted away like an old film reel. I closed my eyes, listened to the hum of the engines, and felt tears sliding down my cheeks, not from regret, but from the realization that at last I had chosen myself. The flight was 12 hours long. I didn't sleep. I wrote. In a small notebook, I listed everything I wanted to do: learn to paint, learn German, walk around Lake Zurich, drink wine in a small cafe, laugh without apologizing. I wanted to know what it felt like to live without being needed. I used to think being needed was the greatest joy in life. Now I understand. Sometimes not being needed is freedom. The plane landed at 9 p.m. Swiss time. An airport staff member was waiting with a sign that read, "Mrs. Juliana Alvarez." He smiled. "Welcome to Zurich, ma'am. I'm Klaus, your relocation guide for the retirement program. You must be tired." I nodded, my voice hoarse. "A little, but I think it's the kind of tired I've waited my whole life for." He drove me to a small apartment in the city center. When he opened the door, I froze. The living room glowed warmly, with windows overlooking a park and, in the distance, Lake Zurich. On the table stood a vase of white tulips and a small card. "Welcome home." I set my suitcase down, walked slowly around the room, touching the curtains, the wooden table, the spotless teacup. It felt strange, like my whole life had been leading up to this moment. I took a shower, made a cup of hot cocoa, and sat by the window. The city was quiet, with only the faint sound of church bells far away. I turned on my phone and had 13 missed calls from Camila. I left them unanswered. Messages kept coming. Mom, where are you? I'm sorry for what I said, but you're scaring me. The kids are asking why they can't see you. I set the phone down without replying. I knew that worry wasn't for me. It was for what I had always provided. Money, insurance, free babysitting. That was fine. She would understand eventually. I powered off the phone and let the room fall silent except for the wind. The next morning, I woke up early. The Swiss sky was pale blue, clouds drifting slowly, birds singing on the rooftops. I put on a sweater and walked along the lake. Older adults strolled, laughing, holding warm coffee cups. I thought, I belong here. I sat on a bench, looking at the mirror, still water reflecting my face, silver hair, tired eyes, but a clear gaze. I opened my phone, pulled up my notes, and added a new line, begin again. In the afternoon, Klaus took me to meet the company's financial advisor, Mr. Meyer, his white hair shining under the light, his voice gentle. You'll live comfortably with this amount, Juliana, he said after reviewing my documents. Switzerland has excellent health care and a warm community for senior expatriates. If you plan to stay long-term, I can help you open a safe investment account. With our rates here, your assets could double in 5 years. I smiled faintly. I once invested in love and lost everything. Now I want to invest in peace. Mr. Meyer smiled knowingly. Then you've chosen the right country. That night, I wrote my first email to Elvira. I've arrived. It's as beautiful as I imagined. When you call Camila, sound natural. Don't pity her. Let her learn her lesson through emptiness. I sent the message, brewed chamomile tea, and played soft music. For the first time in years, I didn't have to soothe anyone to sleep, didn't have to wait for anyone to come home. It was just me, a small room and a vast world outside. 2 days later, right on schedule, Elvira sent a message. Everything's fine, I called Camila. She panicked, said her mother was missing. Police are searching. I left the letter where you told me. I read it and simply sighed. No satisfaction, no anger, just a calm, solid feeling like a stone. It was time for her to understand the price of loss. On the third afternoon, as I was walking around the lake, my phone rang, an international call. I knew who it was. I answered. Camila's voice broke through the static with sobs. Mom, where are you? Elvira said you're gone, said you left a letter, said you can't do this. I looked at the water, my voice as still as its surface. Did you read the letter? I did, but I don't believe it. You can't really leave. You once said you wanted me gone. Now I'm simply granting your wish. I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean it. I was angry. Please come back. I need you. The kids need you. I was silent. The words, need you, had once been the meaning of my life. But this time, I heard something different. Need help, need support, not need love. Do you need me or do you need my help? I asked. Silence. Then a choked sob. Both. I shook my head gently. You have to learn to live without me, just as I'm learning to live without you. Mom, please at least tell me where you are. In a place where I'm respected, I said, and hung up. I sat for a long time, wind brushing through my hair, water rippling. Once, I would have fallen apart out of pity. Today, I felt only peace. I knew that somewhere across the ocean, Camila was learning her first lesson about boundaries. And here, on this side, I was learning my first lesson about freedom. That night, I wrote in my journal. Day 3. No one knocking. No one is demanding. No one commanding. I've never known silence to taste so sweet. I didn't know it then, but from that moment on, my life had truly turned a page. And from that same moment, Camila's life began to fall apart, piece by piece. 3 days after the last call with Camila, I woke up to a quiet Swiss morning, sparrows chirping outside the window and soft sunlight spilling through the white curtains. I made coffee, drizzled in a little honey, then opened my notebook and wrote the first line of the day. I am alive and I am at peace. Simple words, but to me they felt like an oath. For 45 years, I had only lived to serve others. Now, I was learning how to live for myself. I went out and walked around the lake. Today, the wind was strong, the water flashing silver. People walked, biked, and held hands. I realized no one was paying attention to me. No one knew who I was, and that, strangely, made me feel free. I could be anyone. Not Camila's mother, not the devoted grandmother, not the financial guarantor of someone's house. I was just Juliana. When I got back to the apartment, the phone in my pocket vibrated. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Camila. I let it ring 5 times, then silenced it. Less than a minute later, another message. Then, a second call, a third, a fourth. I didn't answer, but my heart still beat faster, not out of fear, but from a clear intuition that this time, she was truly realizing what she had lost. I left the phone alone, sat down at the dining table, and opened my laptop to check my email. A new letter from Elvira was waiting in my inbox. Juliana, everything is going according to plan. Yesterday, Camila came to my place in a panic. She said she couldn't reach you. No one knew where you were. The police only said you'd left a letter and gone of your own will. I told her I was worried too, that you had said you wanted to go far away to find peace. She cried. She said she never thought her mother would actually leave. I finished reading and smiled, not out of glee, but because I felt balance returning. My whole life, I had taught my daughter that I would always be there. Now I was teaching her the opposite lesson, that absence also has a cost. In the afternoon, while I was writing in my journal, the phone rang again. I looked at the screen time and it was David, Camila's husband. I hesitated, then picked up. Juliana? His voice was low and hoarse, tired. Thank God you answered. I don't think there's much to say, David. Please just hear me for a minute. Rebecca, Camila, she's not okay. She's been crying ever since she read your letter. She really regrets it. She said she only said those things because she was angry. She's asking you to come back. We need you. Do you need me, or do you need my money? I asked, my voice cold. Silence on the other end for a moment. I won't deny that has happened before. But it's different now. Mom, we're about to lose the house. I took a deep breath. That's no longer my house. It's your responsibility to keep it. But you co-signed the mortgage, you know that. If you don't intervene, the bank could start foreclosure early. David, I did the right thing. I'm just letting life balance itself. When you had me, I was the one paying for everything. Now I'm letting you learn to pay for yourselves. But the kids, they miss you. I let out a soft laugh, my voice gentler but still firm. I miss them too. But missing someone doesn't mean I have to keep sacrificing. They'll be fine. Children adapt faster than adults think. Silence again. You really won't come back? No, and don't call again. I hung up. That evening, I opened the window and watched the lights shimmer on the lake. The wind carried the smell of wet grass, crisp like a new beginning. I thought about the words I'd just spoken, without hesitation. For decades, I hadn't dared to say no. Today, just those 2 letters made me feel young again. The next morning, when I went to the little cafe down the street for breakfast, Klaus, the relocation guide, smiled and greeted me. You look much happier than the first day. I'm learning how to breathe again, I said. Turns out freedom has a smell. What does it smell like? Coffee and mist. We laughed together. Klaus told me about the international senior community here, people who had left entire lives behind to begin again. I wrote the club's address in my notebook. Maybe I'd go, not to replace my family, but to remind myself I wasn't the only crazy one choosing happiness at this age. At noon, when I got home, the phone was ringing nonstop. I turned it on. 27 missed calls from Camila, 15 messages. The first message, Mom, I'm sorry. The second, Mom, I'm freaking out. Then the messages began to change. Mom, the bank called. They said you have the right to repossess the house because we're behind. You're not really going to do that, right? I set the phone on the table and made myself a cup of herbal tea. No reply. By early evening, a video call came in. I wasn't going to answer, but curiosity made me tap accept. Camila's face appeared exhausted, eyes swollen. Behind her, the kitchen was a mess, a sink full of dishes, paint peeling on the wall, and a flickering light. I saw one of the twins dash across the frame, calling, "Where's Grandma?" That voice made my heart pinch. "Mom," Camila said, her voice shaking. "Where are you? Please tell me. I'll get you. I promise I'll change." I looked straight into the camera. "Do you know why I left?" "Because I was stupid. Because I said horrible things. I didn't think you'd actually do it." "No, Camila. I left because I realized I had lost myself. I didn't leave because I was angry at you. I left because, for the first time, I loved myself more than I loved you." "Mom, please. The kids need you. They will have me again when they're old enough to understand that love is not exploitation. Right now, I need peace." "Mom," I hung up. No tears, no sobbing, just a soft sadness, like when you walk someone to the door of an old house knowing they won't come back. That night, I wrote in my journal, Day 7. The phone rang all night. I didn't pick up. I drank wine, read, and slept well. Maybe silence is the best answer for people who once treated us as a given. Before going to bed, I stepped out onto the balcony and watched Lake Zurich glitter with lights. I whispered to myself, "You wanted me to disappear, didn't you?" I did. And strangely, in this disappearance, I finally exist. I didn't know then that in just a few weeks, this very disappearance of mine would make Camila's world crumble layer by layer, forcing her to face the truth she'd avoided her whole life, that without her mother, everything is more expensive, harder, and far more empty. A week had passed since I arrived in Zurich. Every morning, I walked along the lake, breathing deeply, and wondered why I hadn't done this sooner. Maybe because all my life I'd been taught that sacrifice was a virtue that women were born to give, not to demand. But perhaps only when a person is drained empty do they realize that self-love is the minimum requirement for survival. This morning, I stopped at the cafe by the park, ordered a latte and a croissant. As I was reading the paper, my phone rang. "Elvira." I smiled and answered, "Juliana, you should know this." Her voice lowered, as if sharing a secret. "Camila came to see me this morning. She looked terribly pale, with dark circles under her eyes. She said they're about to lose the house." The bank called, saying the mortgage could be repossessed because they're 3 months behind. She cried, said she can't understand how her mother could be so cold. I was silent. Not because I was pleased, but because I felt a quiet sense of justice being restored. "Did you tell her anything?" I asked. I told her the Juliana I know is the kindest woman alive. If she chose to disappear, there must be a reason. And if you really lose that house, it's not because she took it away. It's because she finally stopped paying for it. I smiled. "Thank you, Elvira." "No need to thank me. I just told the truth. Maybe she still doesn't understand that her mother isn't punishing her. She's just stopped sacrificing." That night, I opened my computer and saw an email from the bank in the USS. The subject line made me take a deep breath. Foreclosure process notification. File Alvarez residence. I opened it and read each line carefully. Due to prolonged delinquency and inability to pay, the bank will proceed with foreclosure within 60 days. The co-signer, Juliana Alvarez, has the right to claim reimbursement of the initial investment, estimated at $145,000, plus accumulated interest. I leaned back in my chair. I never imagined that what once chained me to the house would now become the key to my freedom. I didn't reply to the email immediately. I wanted time to do its work, to let Camila feel what it meant to live without someone cleaning up behind her. 3 days later, I received a message from David. "Juliana, please answer. We're desperate. If the bank forecloses, the kids will have nowhere to live." I read it over and over, then set the phone down. I couldn't deny that I still cared for the children, but caring didn't mean letting them grow up in the same cycle where adults make mistakes and never pay for them. That night, I walked through the old street near my apartment, the light glinting off the cream-colored stone buildings, the cold wind making me shiver. I stopped in front of a small bookstore. On the door, a sign written in German and English read, "It's never too late to begin again." I stood there for a long time. Maybe that message was written for me. The next day, Klaus called to invite me to a seniors hiking group. I said yes, and on Saturday morning, I joined 10 others on a small bus headed toward the Alps. On the bus, I sat beside a kind-faced woman with gray hair named Ingrid. When I told her a little about myself, her eyes lit up. "I know that feeling," she said. "I left Germany too, after my son told me I was a burden. He didn't realize that when a mother leaves, the emptiness she leaves behind is the debt he'll have to pay." I nodded, smiling sadly. "We were all mothers who sacrificed too much." "No," Ingrid corrected gently. "We were just women who were never taught that we have the right to live." Her words made my heart tremble slightly. I looked out the window, and the snow-covered peaks were coming into view. In that moment, I understood that I wasn't alone. There were thousands, millions of women like me, wandering the world carrying the same scar, love that was never returned. That afternoon, I received an international call from an unfamiliar number. I knew who it was. "Juliana." Camila's voice was trembling. "They just sent the foreclosure notice. I'm begging you, please tell them you disagree. If you just sign to delay it, they'll reconsider." "Please. You said you didn't need me, remember?" "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know life would be this hard without you. I was wrong." I stayed silent, then asked slowly, "Are you sorry for losing the house, or for telling me to die?" "Mom, don't say that. I was angry. Angry because I loved you too much?" No answer, only quiet sobs. "Camila," I said calmly, "that house once thought it was a wedding gift, but really it was a chain. I've cut it now. You'll learn to stand on your own." "I believe that." "Mom, I can't. Ethan still doesn't have a job, and the kids' tuition? Then you'll work, just like I did for 40 years to raise you." "Mom, please." I took a deep breath. "You once told me to die. Today I've done the opposite. I'm alive, but I no longer live for you. Goodbye, Camila." I hung up. My hands trembled slightly, but my heart was strangely calm. Maybe it was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but also the bravest. That night, I opened the email and replied to the bank. I confirmed the execution of my co-signer rights to reclaim my initial investment, with all supporting documents attached. After sending it, I exhaled, not in satisfaction, but because at last I had closed a chapter of my life, a chapter of emotional debt. The following week, Zurich slid into spring. Cherry trees by the lake bloomed, and people laughed in the sunlight. I sat in a small cafe, holding a glass of white wine, remembering all those times I drank cold instant coffee during night shifts. Back then, I thought happiness was hearing my daughter call me Mom. Now, I knew true happiness was sitting alone and not feeling lonely. I wrote in my journal, Day 15. "I no longer need to be loved to know I have worth. The world changes the moment I stop begging." I didn't know then that just a few days later, Camila would make my name appear once again in the records of the U.S. Social Services Department out of love. Still, out of greed, and from there, the final battle between mother and daughter would begin, no longer fought with tears, but with law and emotional justice. I was sitting in my usual cafe on Bahnhofstrasse, halfway through an Alice Munro book, when an email from lawyer Ansel appeared. The subject line was short but made my hand freeze. Notice, civil complaint filed by Camila Alvarez. I set the book down, opened the email, and read each word under the soft golden light of a Swiss afternoon. "Dear Mrs. Juliana, I must inform you that your daughter, Miss Camila Alvarez, has officially filed a civil suit with the San Diego County Court, requesting an investigation into the legality of your recent will and financial transactions. She alleges that you were mentally incapacitated when signing those documents and that your act of withdrawing co-owned assets has caused severe financial harm to her family." I read it twice, not because I was shocked, but because it was absurd. The same daughter who once told her mother to just die was now trying to prove her mother had lost her mind, perhaps because only when a mother is declared not of sound mind can her child forgive their own greed. I sat still for a long time, watching my coffee grow cold, the steam fading like an ellipsis. A light breeze swept through, lifting the receipt off the table and dropping it to the floor. I bent down to pick it up and noticed my hand didn't tremble. That night, I called Ansel. "Juliana," he said after hearing the whole story, "I've reviewed the file. She doesn't have a strong case. Everything you signed is legal. But you must understand, this will draw attention. Local papers love stories like this. Daughter sues 70, 3-year-old mother." "I'm not afraid of scandal," I replied calmly. "I'm only afraid that if I stay silent, she'll think money can buy justice. Do you want to countersue?" "Of course. And I want to do it properly, without bitterness, without revenge. I just want the law, for once, to prove that mothers are human, too." The next day, I flew back to the U.S. for 13 quiet hours. When the plane descended into San Diego, I looked out the window and saw the gray-silver sky, the familiar palm trees, and that old feeling, distant and intimidating inside me. I rented a car and drove straight to a small hotel by the beach. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the waves crash against the shore, thinking about all the years I had buried myself in the role of the devoted mother. Enough, I thought. The next morning, I went to the San Diego County Courthouse. The hallway was long, the ceiling high, and cold light spilling through the glass panes. When I stepped into the courtroom, every head turned. Camila sat across the room in a white suit, her hair neatly tied back. She looked younger than I remembered. Her eyes had lost their light. Beside her sat her lawyer while David kept his head down, avoiding mine. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, but my back was straight. Someone whispered, "That's her mother being sued by her daughter." The judge read the file. His voice was steady, but I caught every word. The plaintiff, Miss Camila Alvarez, accuses the defendant, Mrs. Juliana Alvarez, of asset misappropriation and of exploiting a diminished mental state to execute unlawful financial transfers. I listened, and I didn't feel pain. Only pity for the daughter I once held in my arms, who now needed the word defendant to describe the woman who gave her life. Camila's lawyer stood and began, "Your Honor, we have evidence suggesting Mrs. Juliana acted without full mental clarity in her recent financial dealings instance, withdrawing the entire $20,000 from a joint account without notice and revising her will just 1 month before leaving the country. Ansel rose to speak, his deep voice firm. "Your Honor, the defendant was not only fully competent, but entirely within her legal rights regarding assets she herself earned. She took nothing from anyone. She simply ended a long pattern of being taken from." I glanced at Camila. She avoided my gaze, but her hands were clenched tight. I remembered how, at 8 years old, she used to hold my hand the same way when crossing the street. Only back then, she held on because she feared getting lost. Now she held on because she feared losing everything. The hearing lasted 4 hours. I spoke only once when the judge asked, "Mrs. Juliana, do you have anything to say to the court?" I stood and answered slowly but clearly, "Your Honor, I'm not here to win or lose. I'm here to affirm that at 73, I am still lucid enough to know who loves me and who uses me. If independence is a crime, I'm ready to be convicted. But if justice still exists, I hope this court understands that sometimes a mother just wants to live, not to be commanded." The courtroom fell silent. Even Camila looked up, eyes glistening. The judge nodded slightly, then signaled for a recess. 3 weeks later, I received the official notice. The court dismisses the complaint. All financial transactions and the will of Mrs. Juliana Alvarez are deemed valid. Plaintiff shall bear all legal expenses. I folded the paper and exhaled. Not because I had won, but because justice, at last, hadn't forgotten the old. That evening, I received a single text from Camila. "Mom, I lost, but it feels like I'm the one who lost the most." I didn't reply. I just stared out the hotel window, where the ocean kept breaking against the shore, as if reminding me that all wounds need time. The next day, I flew back to Zurich. On the plane, the flight attendant asked, "Would you like something to drink?" "A glass of white wine," I said, smiling. "The most expensive one." The young woman smiled back, not realizing that for me, that glass wasn't to celebrate victory but to mourn a relationship that had died. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, I opened my journal and wrote, Day 22. My daughter sued me, and I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because I needed freedom. I used to think death was the end, but maybe forgiveness is the real beginning. I closed the notebook, rested my head, and shut my eyes. The engine hummed steadily, and I smiled. I had lived long enough to learn one truth. Not everyone who leaves is lost, but they are simply finding their way back to themselves. I returned to Zurich in the chill of late spring. My small apartment was unchanged. A vase of tulips had dried, yet the faint scent of lavender still lingered in the air. I set my suitcase down, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and sat by the window looking down at the street. People passed by, hand in hand, laughter filling the air. As for me, after everything, I only wanted silence. Silence to finally hear myself again. That night, when I opened my notebook, I saw the letter I had never sent, the draft I'd written at the hotel in San Diego before leaving. I picked it up and read it, every word piercing my heart. My daughter, I know the day will come when you understand that love is not submission. I let you take my time, my youth, my strength, and my trust, but you could never take my soul. That's why I left, not to punish you, but to live. When you understand that loving someone doesn't mean possessing them, maybe then you'll understand why I chose silence. I stopped at the last line and smiled faintly. Perhaps this letter no longer needs to be sent. Life itself had already delivered the message for me. The days that followed slipped back into routine, woke early, made coffee, and walking along the lake. In Zurich, spring turns to summer quickly. Cherry blossoms fell on the water like snow, and afternoons stretched endlessly in soft golden light. I started taking art classes with Ingrid. Every morning we sat outside sketching the Zurich lakeside. I chose shades of the color of peace, and sometimes the color of sorrow not yet dissolved. One day, Ingrid asked, "Do you still think about your daughter?" I nodded gently. "Every day, but it doesn't hurt the way it used to." "Do you plan to see her again?" "No," I said after a pause. "At least not now. Some wounds need to be looked at from a distance. Touch them too soon and they'll tear open again." Ingrid smiled. "I understand. I was the same. But one day, you'll write this story not for revenge, but to remember that you survived." Her words stayed with me. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote the first lines of a small memoir. My name is Juliana Alvarez. At 73, I left my daughter to save myself, and I do not regret it. I wrote every day, slowly, as if stitching together the cracks in my heart. The years as a nurse, the night shifts, the mornings I woke early to make breakfast for Camila, the hugs, the cries, the sleepless nights, they all returned. But now, as I wrote, I didn't cry. I only felt gratitude because at least life had given me the chance to begin again. One afternoon, while painting by the lake, I received an envelope from America. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Camila Alvarez. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside were 2 pages. "Mom, I don't know if this letter will reach you. I know what I did was terrible. I thought I was strong, but I was only weak and selfish. When I lost the house, when I lost my job, I finally understood how much you carried, without ever complaining. I'm sorry, Mom. Not because I lost the case, but because I made you believe I had no heart. I do. I just never knew how to love you the right way. If there's a next life, I hope to be your mother, so I can understand how deep that loneliness runs." I read it again and again, each trembling line cutting deeper. There was no plea for forgiveness, only the raw honesty of realization. I placed the letter in my palm and gently smoothed it. At the end, Camila had added a small note. "Mom, I'm working at a small bakery in Santa Barbara now. I wake up at 4 a.m. to mix dough, bake bread, and wash trays. Every time I'm tired, I think of you. Now I understand you didn't abandon me. You taught me how to live." I sat in silence. Tears fell onto the edge of the paper, spreading like mist. Not tears of anger, but of something lighter, a deeper release. I knew I would probably never return to America, but I also knew Camila had begun her own journey. That night, I wrote in my journal, Day 45. I received a letter from my daughter. I won't reply. Not because I'm angry, but because sometimes silence is the most mature way to say, I love you. I folded the letter and placed it inside the photo frame on my desk. The photo was of me and Camila when she was the day I bought her first dress with my night shift bonus. She was beaming, and I, in that photo, had dark circles under my eyes but still wore a smile. That night, rain fell over Zurich. I opened the window and let the cool air in. In the sound of the rain, I felt my heart grow lighter. The words, "Just die," "I need space," "You're a burden," had all turned into distant echoes, stripped of their weight. I poured a glass of wine, raised it toward the window, and whispered, "To Camalathi, daughter who taught me that love cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But I still love you, in my own way." Outside, raindrops fell into the lake, dissolving one by one into the water. And I realized some wounds don't need healing. They only need to be acknowledged. The next morning, I sent a postcard to Elvira. "Everything's fine. The girl has learned to live, and I've learned to forgive." Maybe that's the closest thing to happiness a person can reach. As I dropped the postcard into the mailbox, I felt an unfamiliar peace settle inside me. I looked up at the Zurich sky, blue, thin clouds, warm sunlight. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I was the one who stayed with myself. 3 months after Camila's letter, Zurich had settled into summer. The sky was so blue I could hardly believe such peace still existed somewhere in this world. I kept my old rhythm: morning walks around the lake, afternoons painting with Ingrid, evenings reading and writing. Life was steady, quiet, but not empty. I no longer needed anyone to call me mother to feel I existed. I was Juliana, a woman who had died once to live again. That day, Ingrid brought me a painting. "I painted you," she said with a smile. Against the blue lake, a silver-haired woman sat on a bench, her eyes gazing into the distance. I was surprised. "How did you know I liked to sit there?" Ingrid laughed. "I didn't. But people with eyes like yours can tell they're always looking somewhere." I stared at the painting for a long time. Something inside me stirred, like an old door creaking open. Perhaps I wasn't looking toward the past anymore. I was looking at myself. That afternoon, I went to the lake earlier than usual. The sky was clear, the water still. I sat on my familiar wooden chair in the same spot where I had first written the words, "Begin again." Across the lake, the sound of a violin floated from a street musician. The melody softened my heart, not sadness, but something tender, like the last light of day. I closed my eyes and thought of Camila. Not the woman who had once spoken cruel words, but the child who used to wrap her arms around my neck and ask, "Mom, will you love me forever?" I reached into my bag and took out an old photo, just the two of us in Balboa Park, smiling brightly, my dark hair blowing in the wind. I brushed my fingers over it and smiled. "Yes, Camila, I still love you. I just don't let that love hurt me anymore." As the evening deepened, my phone rang. It was an international number. I hesitated, then answered. Camila's voice came through small and trembling. "Mom, I just wanted to tell you. I paid off the bank loan. I found a stable job. The kids are healthy. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm standing on my own now." I froze. For years, that was the sentence I had once dreamed of hearing. Now, it came with a strange calm. "I'm happy for you," I said softly. "Thank you, Mom," Camila whispered, her voice breaking. "I know you don't need an apology, but I still want to say it. You're the only person I'll owe for the rest of my life." I smiled, tears falling onto my hand. "No, Camila, I never wanted you to owe me anything. I just wanted you to live. Not with my money, not out of guilt, but with your own strength. And today, you did." There was a silence on the other end, then Camila's voice, gentle as breath. "Mom, if I can, I'd like to visit you someday. Not to apologize, just to hug you. If you'll let me." I looked out over the lake. The sunset stretched across the water, a long path of light leading somewhere across the ocean. "When you're truly ready," I said, "my door will always be open, but I want you to come not out of guilt, but out of love." "I understand," Camila whispered, and then fell quiet. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Inside, there was no anger left, only deep, quiet peace. Perhaps real forgiveness doesn't begin when you say, "I forgive you," but when you stop waiting for the other person to change. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, Day 90. My daughter has found her footing. She may never understand the years I endured, but that no longer matters. I don't need recognition to know that my love was not wasted. I lifted my eyes toward the window, where the moonlight shimmered across the lake. My reflection on the surface was no longer the trembling, rejected woman I once was, but someone who had walked through pain and now stood in the gentle light of her own peace. I whispered, "Thank you, Camila, for reminding me that living isn't just about giving, but also about knowing when to stop before love becomes a chain." The next morning, I received a small package. Inside was a crayon drawing, clumsy but full of warmth. Scrawled across it were the words, "To Grandma Juliana, from Emma and Leo." I laughed. My grandchildren still remember me. At the bottom of the envelope was a handwritten note from Camila. The kids asked why Grandma lives so far away. I told them, "You're painting your new sky." I think that's the truest way to put it. I pressed the drawing into my journal and added the final line. Day 91. Life is strange. Sometimes we must leave to return, disappear to be seen, die once to know what it means to live. I set down my pen and closed the journal. Outside, the sunlight danced on Lake Zurich, scattering light like 1,000 tiny crystals. I knew my journey wasn't over, but I had passed the hardest part, learning to love without pain, to live without anyone's permission. And in that moment, I smiled a real smile, no longer bitter, no longer trembling, only peaceful. That autumn, I turned 74. The early cold in Zurich began to slip into every corner of the streets, and the rows of trees along the lake turned amber. I wore the wool scarf Camila had given me when she was the last birthday gift, before the invisible distance between the two of us began. The scarf was old, but I kept it as a piece of memory. I wasn't afraid of those memories anymore. They didn't hurt me now. They only reminded me that I had lived, had loved, and had forgiven. I still taught my painting class every morning, and sometimes I told my students stories about women who started over. They thought I was talking about someone else, but in truth, I was talking about myself. One day, Ingrid walked over, set a newspaper on the table, her voice excited. "Juliana, you have to see this." On the culture page of the Neue Zürcher Zeitung was a long article titled, "An American Woman Reborn at 70, Her Story is Changing How Thousands See Old Age." Below it was a photo of me smiling brightly in my painting class, holding a brush, with the lake glittering in the background. The article talked about the memoir I had written on lonely nights. After Ingrid read the manuscript, she sent it to an editor in Switzerland. I hadn't expected it to be published, let alone expected it to spread so quickly. People wrote to me from everywhere: mothers abandoned by their children, wives after divorce, women who had forgotten they had the right to begin again. "Your story reminded me that I still have time to live for myself," wrote an Italian widow. "I finally stopped being afraid of being called selfish," said another. I read every letter, every email, and I realized, when a woman finds herself again, she doesn't just save herself, but she also clears the path for others. One morning, my inbox had an email from the US. The subject line was simple: "Me and the kids." I opened it, my heart beating lightly. Inside were 3 photos: Camila standing between the 2 kids, in front of the little bakery. Her smile was different, peaceful, unforced. She wrote, "Mom, I read the article about you. I didn't know you had become an inspiration to so many people. Emma and Leo saw your picture and asked, 'Is Grandma really happy now, Mom?' And I told them she's finally living. I don't know if you want us to visit, but the kids are saving up to buy tickets. I promise, this time I'll come out of love, not out of needing you." I put the phone down and exhaled softly. I didn't cry. I just felt a warm light inside, like sunshine streaming into a room that had been dark for too long. I wrote back, "If you truly want to come, come in the spring." When the snow melts, Lake Zurich is the greenest, and the lavender blooms. I will wait not to be forgiven, but to walk, laugh, and live together. The next day, Ingrid said, "Do you realize, Juliana? They finally see you." I smiled and said, "Maybe they don't see, they just see themselves in me. And that's enough." I spent the whole winter writing my second book, Begin Again at 74. This one wasn't about pain anymore, but about light. About how I learned to cook my first Swiss dish, about rainy days going to art exhibits with Ingrid, about the first time I bought a train ticket to Italy just because I wanted to see the sea. I wrote with a light voice, as if I had finally learned to talk to time. In February, I was invited to a live TV interview. The host asked, "What do you think makes people love your story so much?" I smiled, because everyone is afraid of being forgotten. But the truth is, we only disappear when we stop loving ourselves. That answer made the studio go quiet. I saw tears in a few people's eyes. And I knew, somewhere, Camila might also be watching, hearing those words not as a reproach, but as a greeting. That evening, I went home, opened the window, and looked out at the lake. The February moon reflected like a great mirror. I saw myself in their silver, but my eyes were bright. A woman once rejected by her own daughter is now heard by the whole world. I no longer chased justice. I had the highest kind of justice in life. I wrote softly in my journal, Day 365. I no longer measure my worth by the love others have for me. I only know that every morning I wake up, make a cup of coffee, look at the lake, and feel peaceful. Maybe that is happiness. Simple, steady, and entirely mine. Outside, the wind blew through the trees. I whispered, as if speaking to the one who once made me cry, "Thank you, Camila. Because without you, I would never have learned to stand up." And in the moonlight, I see the smile of someone who has been seen again, by the world, and by herself. 1 year after the TV interview, spring returned to Zurich. The city was filled with sunlight and the smell of pastries from the cafe down the street. I sat on the balcony, looking out at Lake Zurich shimmering in the light, where small sailboats drifted slowly like the calm breathing of time. On the table was a cup of herbal tea, my notebook opened, and a fresh letter that had arrived with the sender's address, Camila Alvarez, Santa Barbara, California. I opened the letter. Inside was a photo of 3 people, Camila and the 2 children standing in front of an airport gate, their hands raised high, holding plane tickets. Below the photo, in slanted handwriting, "We're coming. 3 people and 1 heart longing to be reunited." I read it over and over. There were no tears, only a smile. After everything, perhaps the world still grants us one more chance to say hello the right way. 3 days later, I went to the airport to meet them. When the doors opened, I saw Camila first, thinner with short hair, her eyes no longer proud but warm and real. The 2 kids ran toward me shouting, "Grandma!" I knelt and held them close. The smell of children's hair made my throat tighten. Camila stood watching, then walked over and said softly, "Mom, thank you for giving me a second chance." I looked at her for a long moment and smiled. It wasn't me who gave you, it was the one who walked back to take it. In the days that followed, my small apartment was full of laughter. I took the children to see the lake, let them paint with me, and told them stories about a woman who once learned how to love herself. Camila helped me cook, clean, and sometimes quietly wash the dishes without saying anything. One evening, after the kids had fallen asleep, she sat across from me, her voice trembling. "Mom, I know nothing can erase what I said. But if there's still any love left in you for me, I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of it." I took her hand and said gently, "My love for you never disappeared. It was only wasted. Now let it be used the right way to love, not to cage." The next morning, we went together to see the gallery hosting the exhibition, Women Who Began Again. I stood in front of my painting of a woman sitting by the lake, dawn behind her. Under the frame, the caption in 3 languages, "Freedom at last." Camila stared at it for a long time, tears rolling down, then whispered, "I never thought you'd be this radiant at this age." I laughed, putting my hand on her shoulder. When you stop being afraid of losing someone, the light finds you on its own. That day, a photo of 3 generations, Camila and the 2 children, was taken right in front of the gallery. A reporter recognized me and asked, "Mrs. Juliana, If you could say one sentence to the women listening to your story, what would you tell them? I looked into the camera and answered slowly, that happiness doesn't come when other people change. It comes when you're brave enough to step out of the door that hurt you and dare to open a new one, even if you're the only one walking through. That night the apartment was quiet, the children asleep. Camila poured me a glass of red wine. I finished reading Begin Again at 74, she said, and I realized you didn't just write it for yourself, you wrote it for people like me. I smiled. Maybe. But really I wrote it to remind myself that forgiveness isn't going back, it's moving forward without carrying resentment. She was silent. Then after a moment she said softly, I hope one day I can learn that too. The day they left Zurich, the sky was crystal clear. I walked them all the way to the airport, hugged each child, then hugged Camila for a long time. You'll come visit me, right? She asked. I nodded. When I know your heart is peaceful enough to welcome me not as a benefactor, but as a friend. She smiled through tears. I'll wait for that day. When they disappeared from sight, I went back to the lake, standing in the morning breeze. The water shimmered, reflecting the sunlight. I realized every circle has a new beginning. 3 years ago, I left America with a shattered heart. Today, I stood here not needing anyone's approval, not needing to be loved to feel worthy. I was a woman who had learned how to start again, even when she thought it was too late. That evening, I wrote the final line in my journal. I once thought my daughter killed me with her words. But in truth, those very words gave birth to a new, stronger, clearer, freer. I don't know how many years I have left, but for the rest of them, I will live as if every moment is a gift, not from anyone else, but from myself. I set the pen down and closed the notebook. Outside the window, Zurich was bathed in a sunset soft as silk. I poured a cup of tea, lifted it to my chest and said softly, to the women who thought they were too late, know that it is never too late to begin again. And I smiled slowly, the smile of someone who has walked through darkness and found the light behind the last door. If you've ever had to learn to let go in order to be free, tell me your story. Where in the world are you listening from? Share it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to catch more rebirth journeys and Begin Again stories.